What do most games have in common? Well, they all have their own distinct enemies, ranging from illegal explosives on legs, mushrooms that you can stomp on, and colored ghosts that chase a pie around. Welcome to the third devlog of Blobs Dices, where I made a whole bunch of enemies. If you don't know what Blobs Dices is, it is a turn-based strategy game that was made for a 48-hour GMTK game jam, where a roll of the dice determines how many moves you will get, the damage of the moves, and what the enemies will do. So, the world of Blobs and Dices is split into many islands. Each island has its own enemies and special effects. Each island also has some amount of regions, so an island could have a cavern region, a mountainy region, and so on. So, for example, the tutorial island has 5 regions. There's a grassy region, a sandy region, a frozen one, a candy land, and a jungle. Right now, on the grassy region, I have 4 blobs. They aren't that special and don't have many abilities. There's a pebble blob that just deals damage. There's a farmer blob that deals more damage and can heal but has less health. A grassy blob, which is the only unique blob in the region, that can hide and block all damage. And there's a hunter blob that can weaken you. Unless I want to make a game where you fight the same 4 enemies over and over again for the rest of your life, I'll need to add more enemies to make a functioning game. To get some ideas for new enemies, I scrolled through the old version of Blobs and Dices to find some special enemies amongst the pile of flaming garbage. The only abilities that are going to make it into the new version will be the Spade Blob's Weaken, which lowers the damage of the player, the Guard Blob's Damage Protection, which blocks all damage if it's below a certain amount, and the Seaweed Blob's Shatter, which increases the amount of damage the player takes. These blobs probably won't survive this second version, and I'll probably just dissect the good parts of them while leaving out the bad parts. After a while, I finish making all of the blobs for the first island, and I'll show the most interesting ones. There's a sandcastle blob that uses its beach ball to stun you, a kelp blob that heals using water, a snowman blob that freezes you when it dies, a jungle explorer blob that can start a wildfire, jungle musician blobs that give different effects, and a jungle chief blob that spawns in random jungle musicians. In order to make some unique enemies, I need to make a system that can handle custom status effects. This system has 3 main parts: an effect interpreter that converts a string of data into a class that the effect storage can store. The effect storage is also in charge of creating and destroying some effect particles. Then, the effect manager uses the effects in the effect storage to see what sort of effects it should put on the player. You might be thinking, why not just store the entire status effect in a class and pass that to the effect storage? And my answer to that is because I overcomplicate things a lot and because I don't treasure my sanity. The game would be really boring if everything was predictable and you were only fighting enemies. So I added enemy ambushes. These are basically events that can happen that will affect the game in some sort of way. A healing rain ambush could heal all the enemies to full health, or a sandstorm ambush could rearrange all the enemies into a different order. This adds another layer of depth and unpredictability to a game where everyone's moveset is shown to you. But I did want the player to know when an ambush would appear, but not what it would be. So I spent another few hours making a progress bar that would show your progress in that level. The yellow area would be the part of the level that has not been spawned in yet. The orange area is the enemy spawner's progress, and the green area is your progress. So if you defeat an enemy, only the green part would go up. I also assigned each enemy a difficulty. And I also made this crude little graph at this level select screen that shows a graph of the enemy difficulty in that level that can allow the player to know what the level might contain. What other horrible things did I add to the game? Well, I added bosses in the form of mechs. It would be really boring if the boss was just some enemy but with its health and damage multiplied by like 1,000. So I spent some time making a custom boss attack script that allows the boss to do things that normal puny blobs cannot do. For one, the mech can attack in the same way that player attacks, with the dice roll determining how many moves it can do, forcing you to think whether or not you want to reroll those precious 6s away. Another thing is that mechs can reorder enemies, spawn new enemies, and move itself around the screen. And the most unique thing that the mechs have are the phase system. You beat each phase by killing one of the anchors connected to the mech. Every time you kill an anchor, you will get stunned and gain 90 seconds back on your time. Right, I forgot to mention that you only start with 60 seconds to defeat the boss, and your best bet is to take out an anchor. If you directly damage the boss, it will just heal some amount of health back, depending on the amount of anchors still alive. So, the first boss's first phase can only jump and shoot a projectile to damage you and will occasionally move around. The second phase can only move and summon some weaker enemies, but the third phase is where the difficulty really spikes up. It has a 50-50% chance to deal damage and move around, but when it deals damage, it deals a whole lot of damage, enough to take away half of your health most of the time. The fourth phase has the mech moving around, shooting you with projectiles and spawning in enemies. And the fifth stage is everything combined, which can drain most of your health really quickly, and you will have no more ways to regain lost time at this phase, so you should save up your time for this final stretch. I also experimented with adding in timed events, where for example, you could play a Christmas themed event from December 20th to 31st. To do this, I just used a free web hoster and put in some simple PHP code to get the server time. Using the server time, I compared it to the event's start and finish times, and if it is between the start and finish time, then an event button would be enabled. But this system doesn't support multiple events, so I'm not gonna plan on making those anytime soon. Wow, this video script is much longer than I expected, but if you want to play this game, I have a link to the Jam version in the description. It's built on WebGL, so any device should be able to play it, including mobile ones. That's the end of this devlog. See you next time.